When I bought that abandoned farm in rural Tennessee, I thought I was getting the deal of a lifetime. 300 acres of rolling hills and farmland for less than the cost of a decent car in Nashville. My divorce attorney had just called with news that seemed like a miracle after 6 months of legal hell. My grandfather Ezra, who I barely remembered from childhood, had left me his entire property in his will. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. I should have known something was wrong when the real estate agent wouldn't meet me there in person. She handed me the keys at a gas station 20 miles away and said, "Your grandfather was a good man, but that place has been empty for 13 years. Folks around here learned to leave it alone." I didn't care about local superstitions. I needed to escape. My life in Nashville had imploded when I caught my wife Cheryl in our bed with my business partner. The divorce took everything except my truck and whatever dignity I had left. This farm represented my only chance at a fresh start, maybe building something with my own hands instead of shuffling numbers around for other people's dreams. The 3-hour drive to Waverly gave me time to think about what I remembered of Grandpa. Ezra, he was my father's father, a tall man with calloused hands who spoke in short sentences and always smelled like tobacco and motor oil. After my grandmother Clara died when I was 7, he became a ghost to our family. Dad said Ezra didn't want visitors anymore. That grief had made him strange and reclusive. He stopped coming to Christmas, stopped calling on birthdays, my mother had explained when I told her about the inheritance. "We figured he'd sold that old place years ago. Are you sure you want to go out there alone?" But alone was exactly what I needed. No more lies, no more lawyers, no more looking at the ruins of everything I thought I'd built. Just me, 200 acres of Tennessee soil, and whatever piece I could carve out of the silence. The farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road that hadn't seen maintenance in over a decade. Paint peeled from the wooden siding like sunburned skin, and several windows were boarded up with plywood that had weathered to gray. The front porch sagged under the weight of accumulated leaves and debris. Behind the house stood a massive red barn that dominated the landscape, its metal roof still intact despite the years of neglect. Fields stretched in every direction, overgrown with wild grass and brambles, but I could see the bones of what had once been productive farmland. With enough work and the right equipment, this place could be beautiful again. I spent my first 2 days cleaning out the farmhouse, making it barely livable. The electricity worked, thankfully, and the well water ran clear after I let it flush for an hour. Each room held traces of my grandparents' life together, photographs on mantels thick with dust, furniture covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts. In the bedroom I claimed as my own.
I found a picture of Grandpa Ezra and Grandma Clara on their wedding day.
She was stunning, with silver blonde hair and eyes that seemed almost luminous in the old photograph. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. That second night, lying in my grandfather's old bed and listening to the wind move through the empty rooms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not happiness exactly, but the absence of constant anxiety. No phone calls from lawyers, no reminders of betrayal around every corner, no neighbors who knew about my humiliation. Just the sound of crickets and the vast darkness of rural Tennessee. I should have paid attention to the other sounds, the ones that didn't belong, the deep voices drifting across the fields from the direction of the barn, speaking in what sounded like a language I'd never heard before. Low, melodic, almost like singing, but with words that made my skin prickle with recognition, even though I couldn't understand them. When I finally worked up the courage to investigate on my third night, armed with nothing but a flashlight and my grandfather's old Louisville Slugger baseball bat, I thought I might find trespassers or maybe homeless people who'd been using the property as shelter. I was wrong about everything. When those 3 women descended from the hayloft like something out of a fever dream, when the first one spoke my full name with a voice that resonated in my chest, I realized I hadn't inherited just a farm. I'd inherited a responsibility that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my bloodline, and myself. The morning after I first heard those voices from the barn, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress does funny things to your mind, and God knows I'd been under enough pressure to crack a normal person in half. My divorce had dragged on for 8 months, bleeding me dry financially and emotionally. Cheryl's lawyer was like a shark that smelled blood in the water, going after every asset we'd built together during 12 years of marriage. The worst part wasn't losing the house or the savings account. It was discovering that my business partner Jake had been planning this betrayal for over a year, systematically moving clients to his own firm while sleeping with my wife behind my back. People I'd trusted with everything had turned my life into a carefully orchestrated lie. I'd grown up believing that hard work and loyalty meant something. My parents, married for 38 years, had taught me that commitment was sacred. Dad worked double shifts at the auto plant to put me through college, and Mom never missed a single one of my baseball games, even when she was pulling overtime at the hospital. They built something solid together, something that lasted. Maybe that's why Grandpa Ezra's abandonment of our family had always bothered me so much. After Grandma Clara died, he just disappeared from our lives. No more Sunday dinners, no more helping Dad fix the roof or teaching me to change oil in the garage. One day he was part of our family, and the next day he was gone. Grief affects people differently, Mom had said when I asked why we never visited him anymore. Some people need space to heal, honey. Your grandfather loved Clara more than life itself. When she died, part of him died too. But standing in his farmhouse kitchen that morning, surrounded by the remnants of their life together, I started to understand that my mother's explanation was incomplete. This wasn't just a man drowning in grief. This was someone who'd been protecting something, hiding something important enough to cut himself off from everyone he loved. The kitchen table still held his coffee mug, a simple white ceramic cup with a chip in the handle. Next to it sat a stack of farming magazines from 2011, the year he'd apparently stopped caring about the outside world. But what caught my attention were the other magazines underneath, publications I'd never heard of. Ancient Agricultural Practices, Herbal Medicine Quarterly, Folklore and Mythology Review. These weren't the reading materials of a simple Tennessee farmer. These were the research tools of someone studying subjects most people would dismiss as fantasy or superstition. I flipped through pages marked with his careful handwriting, notes about soil composition and moon phases, healing properties of native plants, references to bloodlines and genetic inheritance that made no sense in the context of growing corn and soybeans. By afternoon, I'd explored every room in the house except one. The master bedroom remained locked, and none of the keys on Grandpa Ezra's ring would open it. But as evening approached and shadows began to stretch across the overgrown fields, I found myself drawn repeatedly to the windows facing the old red barn. Something was waiting for me out there, something that would explain why a successful financial advisor had inherited a farm from a grandfather who'd spent his final years researching ancient mysteries. That third night, the voices from the barn started earlier and grew louder. What I'd initially dismissed as wind through the rafters now clearly sounded like conversation, deep and melodic, but in no language I recognized. The cadence reminded me of church hymns, but there was something older about it, something that made the hair on my arms stand up. I'd spent the day trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Maybe it was teenagers using the abandoned barn as a hangout spot. Maybe it was homeless people who'd been squatting there for years, thinking the property would stay empty forever. Either way, I couldn't let it continue. This was my land now, my chance at a new life, and I wasn't going to let trespassers ruin it. Around 10 o'clock, I called the local sheriff's office. The dispatcher, a woman with a thick Tennessee drawl, took down my information with what sounded like reluctance. "You're out at the old Thorn place?" she asked. "Haven't had a call from that property in over a decade. That's because nobody's been living here," I said. "But I'm here now, and there are people in my barn who shouldn't be there." A long pause. "Sir, are you sure you want us to come out there tonight? Maybe this is something better handled in daylight." The suggestion struck me as odd. Since when did police departments recommend waiting until morning to deal with trespassers? "No, I want this handled now. I can't sleep with people wandering around my property." "We'll send someone when we can," she said. But something in her tone suggested they had no intention of showing up anytime soon. By midnight, no patrol car had appeared, and the voices from the barn had grown so loud I could hear them clearly through my bedroom window. They seemed to be calling to each other back and forth in that strange musical language. Occasionally, I caught what sounded like my name woven into their conversation, which was impossible but unmistakable. I grabbed my grandfather's Louisville Slugger from the closet and found a heavy-duty flashlight in the kitchen drawer. My hands shook as I pulled on my boots, but I forced myself to move. Whatever was happening in that barn, I was going to face it head on. I'd spent the last year running from problems, letting lawyers and judges and cheating spouses make decisions for me. That version of myself was dead. This was my chance to be someone different, someone who didn't back down. The walk from the house to the barn felt like crossing into another world. Every step took me further from the safety of electric lights and familiar walls, deeper into darkness that seemed to pulse with its own life. The voices stopped the moment I reached the barn door, as if they knew I was coming. My flashlight beam trembled as I reached for the heavy wooden handle. "Hello, anyone in there? This is private property, and you need to leave now." Silence pressed against my eardrums like physical weight, but I knew someone was listening, watching, waiting to see what I would do next. The old barn door creaked on its hinges as I pulled it open, and 3 pairs of amber eyes stared down at me from the darkness above, glowing like embers in the night. My flashlight beam shook as those 3 pairs of glowing eyes watched me from the hayloft. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get back to the house and barricade myself inside until morning. But something deeper kept my feet planted on the barn floor. Maybe it was stubborn pride, or maybe it was the way those eyes didn't seem hostile, just patient, like they'd been waiting for this moment for years. "I know you're up there," I called out, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Come down and explain what you're doing on my property." The silence stretched until I thought they might ignore me completely. Then came the sound of movement, graceful and deliberate. 3 figures descended from the loft, not climbing down a ladder but moving with fluid precision that defied physics. As they reached the barn floor, my flashlight revealed their impossible height and the ethereal quality of their appearance. The woman in the center stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice resonated through my chest like the lowest notes of a church organ. "David Ezra Thorne, you have finally come home." The way she said my full name, including the middle name I never used, hit me like a physical blow. "How do you know who I am? Who are you people?" She smiled, and there was something infinitely sad about the expression. "We are not people, David. We are the last daughters of a forgotten race. Your grandfather was our protector, our guardian in this world. We have been waiting for you since the day he died." "That's impossible. My grandfather never mentioned anyone living here." The second woman moved into the light, her silver hair catching the flashlight beam like spun moonlight. "Ezra kept many secrets to protect us. He knew that one day his bloodline would return to fulfill the promise he made 50 years ago." My mind reeled. Nothing they were saying made sense, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. These women stood nearly 7 feet tall, with features that seemed carved from marble and eyes that held depths of knowledge I couldn't comprehend. They moved with ancient grace, spoke with voices that carried centuries of wisdom. "What promise?" I asked, though part of me was afraid to hear the answer. The third woman, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "The promise to keep us safe until the bridge between worlds could be rebuilt. Your grandfather served as that bridge for decades, but his human life was finite. Yours is not entirely human." She reached into the folds of her flowing dress and withdrew an envelope, yellowed with age. My name was written on it in my grandfather's careful handwriting, along with a note, "For David, when the daughters reveal themselves." I stared at the envelope, understanding that whatever it contained would change my life forever. I could still leave, still walk away from this impossible situation and pretend it never happened. I could sell the farm and return to Nashville, find another job, rebuild my ordinary life. But as I looked at these 3 mysterious women who claimed to have known my grandfather for decades, I realized I'd already made my choice the moment I decided to investigate the barn instead of hiding in the house. I took the envelope with steady hands. "Tell me everything," I said. Back in the farmhouse kitchen, I sat at my grandfather's old table while the 3 women arranged themselves around me like ancient sentinels. The tallest one had introduced herself as Serafina, her companions as Celeste and Morgana. Names that sounded like they belonged in mythology books, not sitting in a Tennessee farmhouse at 2 in the morning. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in my grandfather's careful script, dated just 3 months before his death. "David, if you're reading this, the daughters have chosen to trust you as they trusted me. 50 years ago, I was a young farmer struggling to make this land profitable when I found them injured and hunted in my backwoods. They were dying, pursued by men who wanted to exploit their abilities for power and profit. I looked up at Serafina. "What abilities?" "Read on," she said gently. Your grandfather explains better than we could. I returned to the letter. They are not human as we understand it, but they are not monsters either. They are healers, protectors, keepers of knowledge that could save our dying world. Serafina can heal injuries and illnesses that modern medicine cannot touch. Celeste understands the language of growing things, can make barren soil fertile with a touch. Morgana holds the memories of their people, stories and wisdom going back thousands of years. The words should have sounded like the ravings of a man losing his mind. But sitting across from these impossible women, I felt truth settling into my bones. There's more, David. Something I never told your father or anyone else in our family. Your grandmother Clara was one of them. The letter fell from my hands. I stared at the three women, then back at the pages scattered on the table. That's impossible. Grandma Clara was human. She died of cancer. Morgana leaned forward, her ancient eyes filled with compassion. She chose to become human to marry your grandfather. The transformation cost her most of her powers and shortened her life considerably, but she said their love was worth any sacrifice. I grabbed the letter again, desperate to understand. You carry their blood, David. Not fully, but enough. Enough to see us as we truly are instead of the illusions we show to protect ourselves. Enough to serve as the bridge we need to survive in this modern world. Serafina stood and moved to the kitchen window, gazing out at the moonlit fields. Your grandmother's essence still lives in this land. She guides the crops, protects the animals, watches over us. If you stay and accept your role as our guardian, you'll learn to feel her presence too. Guardian of what, exactly? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. The last of our kind, Celeste replied. We are dying out, David. Our people once numbered in the thousands, but fear and persecution have reduced us to a handful scattered across the world. This farm is one of the last safe places for beings like us. I thought about my failed marriage, my destroyed business, the emptiness that had consumed me for months. Then I looked at these three extraordinary women who had waited 13 years for me to find my way home. What do I need to do? I asked. Serafina smiled, and for the first time since my grandmother died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. 6 months later, I wake every morning to the sound of wind chimes that Celeste crafted from hollow reeds that grow nowhere else in Tennessee. The melodies they create seem to carry messages across the fields, calling birds to pollinate the crops and drawing beneficial insects to protect our harvest. Our harvest. I still can't believe I'm thinking in terms of we and our, after spending so many years focused solely on my own survival. The farm has transformed into something that defies agricultural science. Under Celeste's guidance, I've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate what the soil needs, how to plant according to lunar cycles that actually matter, and why certain combinations of crops create symbiotic relationships that triple normal yields. My organic vegetables have attracted buyers from Nashville restaurants willing to pay premium prices for produce they describe as otherworldly. Serafina has begun teaching me about healing, not just with herbs and traditional remedies, but with something deeper. She calls it listening to the body's true voice. I've watched her help neighbors with ailments that doctors couldn't diagnose. Chronic pain that disappeared after a single session, depression that lifted like fog burning off in morning sunlight. Word has spread quietly through the county, and people drive from 3 states away seeking her help. But it's Morgana who has shown me the most profound truths about my heritage. She carries the complete history of their people in her mind. Stories passed down through generations of women who served as living libraries. Through her, I've learned that my grandmother Clara wasn't just one of them. She was their leader, their queen. She gave up immortality and supernatural abilities to live a human lifetime with my grandfather. Clara knew that our survival depended on integration with humanity, Morgana explained during one of our evening talks on the front porch. Pure-blood beings like us are too removed from human concerns to understand how to navigate your modern world. But someone with mixed heritage, someone who could walk between both worlds, could serve as a bridge. I feel my grandmother's presence everywhere on this land now. Sometimes it's just a warm breeze that carries the scent of her favorite roses. Roses that shouldn't bloom in October but somehow do. Other times it's more direct, like the morning I found a handwritten note in her familiar script tucked under my coffee mug, simply saying, "You're exactly where you belong." The divorce that destroyed my old life now seems like a necessary destruction, clearing away everything false to make room for something real. Cheryl called last month, crying and asking if I'd consider reconciliation. I felt nothing but pity for her, trapped in a life built on deception while I'd found my way to something authentic. My parents visit now, something they never did when Grandpa Ezra was alive. They don't fully understand what I'm doing here, but they see the change in me. The anger and bitterness that consumed me for years has been replaced by purpose. I'm not just growing crops, I'm preserving ancient wisdom. I'm not just living alone, I'm protecting the last guardians of knowledge that humanity desperately needs. Every night, I walk through fields that glow softly under starlight, fields tended by beings who remember when the world was young. I've finally found where I belong,